Hello, my name is Oleksandr Leushchenko. I'm a senior staff mobile engineer at Tide and GDD in Flutter and Dart. I develop cross-platform mobile apps for almost 10 years, worked with different companies, tiny startups and big corporations, in teams of any size, and I've noticed different patterns of successful projects. There are tons of different criteria, of course, but good communication and the intention to automate everything from day zero are truly one of the essential ones. Today we will cover both these topics, but before talking about good teams, let's think about what is a good app. I will give you a second or two to answer this question. Why do you like apps you like? Have you found a reason? Well, there might be so many answers to this question. Some of you might think, my favorite app is so fancy, I just love it. Well, my fellow designers and folks with an extremely developed sense of beauty, you're right, design is important. Though sometimes there might be too much design. The problem was raised by Paul Adams, ex-brand, product and UX design at Facebook, Google, YouTube and others. In his great article, which is called The Dribblization of Design, he states that many UX UI designers are practicing digital art instead of creating good mobile apps. Most of the design on Dribbble looks great on Dribbble only, but not in real life. Well, of course, design is important, but it's not essential. What is essential then? Maybe we love apps without any bugs. Well, of course we do. Here is an app. It shows an empty screen with an image. I don't think it's completely bug-free, but the chances that most of its users will not face any problems are quite high. Again, this app might be a state of art, but that's not a good app or app that user might love. From my perspective of view, a good app, an app that I might like, is an app that solves my problem in the most efficient way. So the app must be an answer or a solution for something. And how to create a solution? You need to make sure that you understand the problem. How can you understand other people's problems? By talking. Just ask them and listen. The problem is that we, developers, do not always have a chance to ask real users about their problems. It's really common that we operate user stories. Any problems with user stories? Well, no, but actually, yeah. Usually they require clarifications. To get required clarifications, we ask for examples to cover edge cases. Spoiler alert for the topic. Examples are extremely good for documenting the app's behavior. User stories are unidirectional. That means that someone creates a user story, moves it to a to-do backlog. Then the developer, that's you, picks that story, reads it, asks for more samples, returns it to a common backlog. It's a slow cycle of endless clarifications. But the most interesting part here is that the user story is not even a story. Let's write a real story instead. For example, here is a marvelous story about how I bought ice cream. Do you remember my iPhone with Apple Pay? Once I was in the store and I asked for the ice cream and they paid. As a result, I had ice cream. Well, that's a story, huh? While I'm waiting for my polite surprise, let's rewrite the story a bit. I will turn it into a manual on how to buy ice cream. Given you have a device that supports Apple Pay, when you are in the store and you ask for ice cream and you pay, then you'll have ice cream. Gorgeous. But you know, there will be always someone who will ask that many questions. What if my device supports Apple Pay, but I didn't set it up? What if I'm in the store that is not selling ice cream? What if I accidentally asked another visitor? What if I don't have money? What if it's not possible to pay it with Apple Pay in this particular store? What if? What if? What if is the most important question for your product. Listen to people that ask what ifs, because they will make your app much better. Where to find people that will help you with what ifs? Well, usually we call these folks domain experts. These experts are sources of both examples and what ifs. And they are not a group of folks in suits that speak in math. If you develop an app for physicians, ask physicians. If you develop a music app for teenagers, teenagers are your domain experts. Well, you got it. Talk to your users. But there is one more expert that we usually skip. It's you. You have the domain knowledge of your area, so you might be less about examples, but much more about what ifs. Having conversations with domain experts, using examples to gain a shared understanding of the desired behavior and discover unknowns, that is what BDD is. BDD is about human language, not Dart, not math, just plain English or Ukrainian or French. It's about dialogue, a constant flow of examples and what ifs. Now you may think, all right, I've got it. We just need to talk to our users and write better user stories. Well, yes, but actually no, not really. Let me show you how to translate talks into code. Here we have a good old counter app. I promised you to translate talks into code, so let's start with talks. To document our conversation, I will create a new file. This file will act as documentation that describes some counters features. Let's call it a counter.feature then. This is a document, and documents usually have some header. What can we put here? Well, that's a feature and that's a counter. Usually I would put more text here, add some description, additional details, and maybe even a link to a Jira task, but for now counter is good. Cool, let's talk. What can we do with the counter? Well, we may open it. That's some use case or scenario for a counter. Let's call this scenario the counter just started. What should happen when the counter just started? Well, the user should see some text and a button. Alright, what can we do with the counter? Let's say that the user can tap on an add icon. That would be another scenario. The counter should increase. Again, given the app is running, when I tap icons add icon, then I see one text. So we have a really basic documentation now. What's next? Now let's translate talks into code. Our documentation is written in a language called Gherkin. It's an industry standard for behavior-driven development, BDD. Here you might see almost all its syntax. Features should start with keyword feature, scenarios with scenario, and each scenario follows a given when then pattern. How to convert this into code? There is a package for that. In fact, if you search for BDD on pubdev, you'll find many different packages. You can choose any, the idea will be the same. I like code generation more than regular expressions, that's why I'll use BDD widget test package. It uses code generation, so we need to add build runner to the dev dependencies. And of course, we need to add the package itself. If you are familiar with code generation, you might guess what's next. If not, to run code generation, you should write this command and wait for a couple of seconds. This command will not only run the generation process, but will make it listen to changes inside the project. Look, some code was generated. I'm thrilled to see what's there. Well, that looks almost like our feature file. Look, feature name became a group name, scenarios became tests, and scenario steps became test lines. Notice that the step folder was generated. It holds all steps for all scenarios of our projects. Let's open one. Magic, but how? Why? What's going on? Relax, we just used common steps only. The BDD widget test package is smart enough to save you some time typing and generated these files for you. We will talk about how to create your own steps soon, but before that, let's run tests. Fast. Usually we talk and write specification before doing the actual development. So if you ever wanted to try the test-first approach for the development, here's your chance. Let me show you what that usually looks like. Let's say that we should see the to word instead of a number when the counter shows 2. The same given the app is running step. When I tap icons add icon and I tap icons add icon, then I see 2 text. My code generation is still running, so the moment I save the file, a new test was generated. Let's run tests. I hope one should fail now. Alright, we have a failing test. It's time to fix it. Following test-first practices, I will do this in the most straightforward way. If counter is 2, then show 2, otherwise show counter value. Our tests should pass now. Nice! Let's look at our tests now. The line given the app is running is duplicated in all scenarios. If it was the app's code, we would want to extract it somewhere to avoid code duplication. The same here. I will create a new section in our documentation which is called background. In the background, I may place all lines that will be shared across all scenarios. Now our scenarios look much cleaner. We tend to use human language in our tests, but you would not say I tap icon and I type icon, right? You would say I tap the icon twice. Let's refactor this scenario a bit. I will write it like when I tap icons twice. The code generation is still working, so right after I save the file, I'll have a new step generated. The step is the custom one, so I will have to implement it myself. The implementation would be similar to iTap icon. In fact, we even may use the iTap icon implementation by just invoking it twice. And of course, I don't need those steps now. Cool, let's run our tests. That's the way you may develop your apps. Talk with the team, with users, create scenarios, validate them, generate tests for your app. All you have to do would be to fix your tests. We like apps without bugs. Is it true that if the app is covered with tests, then it is bug-free? Of course not. Tests prove that only scenarios that are covered with tests are working. But at least you may verify that you have little to no code that is not covered with tests. To validate this, we may run the Flutter test coverage command. This command will generate the coverage report. You may generate an HTML report from it, or if you're using the Coverage Gutters plugin like I do, you may see which lines are covered by tests right in the IDE. As you may see, we have green lines everywhere, which means that all business logic of the app is covered. We were talking about functionality, but what if you want to test the UI itself? Well, there is a package for that. Let me show you. We like apps with good design. What if it's a requirement that the app's primary color is green? The first option might be to look at widget configuration, but we might have a problem here. Let's say that we want to validate that the icon is green. But the color depends on theme. How to validate the color in tests? We may write complex steps that will iterate through the widget tree looking for themes and other configurations, get the required color from there and compare it to the expected one, but that would be really hard to write and, most importantly, to maintain. Instead, we will use golden tests here. There is a package for that which is called Golden Toolkit. I'll have to restart code generation now. So let's create a new scenario. The counter is green. How to validate the color? Let's make a screenshot. Validate it just once manually and then trust our tests to do the validation for us. I'll create a new step. Then the counter screenshot is verified. Now we need to implement this step. Here things will become tricky. If I will just run this test, I will get an exception. That's because the test method name is test widgets, but for golden tests it must be test goldens. So we have to change the name. We can do it like that. Now we have an error. We need to import that name. To do that, I'll write import in the feature file. That's when things became a bit messy. Our documentation gets unnecessary details. It's possible to get rid of them here, all answers are in the documentation, but I am a bit limited in time, so I'd like to focus on other stuff now. To generate screenshots, which we call goldens, I need to run this command. A new file was just generated. It's a screenshot of the app. Oh, look, something is wrong with fonts. And that's fine. We have this problem because the font of the app was not loaded, and so all texts were replaced with black and gray lines. It's so easy to fix this. The solution is in Golden Toolkit documentation. But you know what? I kinda like it as is. This behavior forces me to write proper tests instead of just making tons of screenshots. I want to validate the counter in my tests and not the screenshot of a counter. By the way, we need to make our counter green, right? So let's do this. Now I need to update screenshots one more time. Like that. And now let test framework to validate my screenshot. Most probably your real app needs to communicate with some backend, but our tests are more like unit tests. Using the real backend will just crash the app. So what can you do? Let me show you one trick. Here is an app from Anna Leushchenko. This app shows the space launches list. Well, we are less interested in the app itself today, sorry Anna. Let's look straight at tests. The background section looks familiar, the same with then I see text, and I wait step should be intuitively clear. We just wait here, and we have two given steps. Let's look at the implementation. It is possible to add a network interceptor that will prevent a real API call. You may wonder how it's implemented, so let me show you. This interceptor checks all network requests, catches all requests to that particular URL, and replaces the output. That means that the app will not even know that the network was fake. So all deserialization, mapping from data transfer objects, well, literally everything will be tested with our tests. But this is not for real. The network is mocked, the database is fake. Show me real tests. Okay, here you go. Let's get back to the counter app. If you want to validate everything for real, you need integration tests. I will create a new folder for them. And of course, we'll need to add a new dependency. I will restart a code generation now. By default, code generation ignores integration test folder, so we need to configure the code generation. Oh look, there is an additional trick in the configuration. It says that it is required for sharing steps between widget and integration tests. Let's try to create a feature file in integration tests now. I will just copy-paste our old documentation and maybe remove a few scenarios. A new test was generated. All steps were already implemented, so I can just run tests. That might take a while because now the real app compiles and installs on a real device. Here we would not need interceptors to mock network queries. We will have a real database, real platform-specific features, because these tests will test the real app. Describing features first and then writing the minimum code that covers the feature makes you focus on what is important only. You will not spend hours writing awesome services and repositories if a simple CRUD entity will do. You will not handle situations that cannot affect users' behavior and so they are less important. It's like a Yagni, you aren't gonna need it principle that is bundled in your dev process. The traditional approach with user stories is good for outsourcing companies, when the scope is fixed and everything that is outside of the scope is charged additionally. To create a truly good modern mobile app, you need to talk to domain experts, both end users and the dev team. It's easier to talk when you understand each other. So we talk in examples and document all what-ifs. Then we generate tests for the app from our documentation. If you are experienced in BDD, you might say that was not BDD at all. And you're right. From my experience, it's easier to start like this, but here are a few recommendations for you if you want to use BDD as a pro. It's really common when all our steps are starting with I. I type something, I enter text, and so on. This is not a problem while all Gherkin scenarios for a project use this point of view. But if in one step you'll have when the user enters something, and in the next step there will be I see the icon, that would be really hard to read. So which point of view is better? There is no definitely correct answer. But if your app has only one role, and you're sure that I and user are always the same person, pick the one you prefer. If your app might have several roles, use a third-person point of view. When the user taps the button, then the administrator sees the icon. Or, if you just like the first person, write an additional given statement, like given I logged in as administrator. In real BDD, we describe the functionality and not actions. So instead of writing when I enter test at test.com text into login edit field, and I enter password into password edit text field, and I tap login button, you write when I log in. Why? To not repeat yourself all the time. At some point, the login process becomes shared knowledge. So let's follow the dry, don't repeat yourself principle in the documentation too. Well, this problem should be intuitive clear. If you see when steps after then steps, just split the scenario. Sometimes you may find yourself writing a long scenario. By long, I mean more than 6 lines. Long scenarios are harder to read, so just combine multiple steps into a single step. When the user logs in or when I am on the search screen, without specifying exact steps and parameters. That's all I wanted to show you for today. If you have something to ask, do not hesitate to ping me on Twitter or drop me a direct message. Thanks for watching. Bye!